Welcome to Judaism Today, our program, Ethics versus Ritual. Our guest, someone that I've really been trying to get here for a very long time. He may or may not be aware of that, but it's something that I've been looking forward to for a very long time, and especially for the subject that we're dealing with tonight. Our guest, Rabbi Stephen Dworkin, Congregation Anshe Chesed Synagogue Center in Linden, New Jersey. Rabbi Dworkin, welcome to Judaism Today.
Thank you very much, Jack. Pleasure to be here.
The subject that I've asked if you could help us with is something that I have felt for some time, frankly, is that there's a lot of misperceptions about the interrelationships of ethics and ritual within the Jewish community, but also outside of the Jewish community, of just how Judaism views these two elements. And I think if we can help people understand a little more authentically just what Judaism has to teach about it. Let's begin with ritual. Why is ritual so important in the life of people who identify strongly with Judaism?
I think really we have to define ritual just for a moment in a very quick manner. Ritual, I would say, are ceremonies or rites which deal with religious observance. Differentiating it from ethics for the moment, truthfully, it is the ritual of the Jewish people that in many ways makes us different from other religions. All religions are supposed to preach and supposed to teach morality and ethics. We'll define that a little later. It's the ritual which basically is the religious observance component, the ceremonial component of Judaism, which really makes us so different from other of the great religions of the world. And therefore, to divorce oneself from ritual, really one divorces himself from the meaningful practice of Judaism.
Where did these rituals come from? How do we get them?
We believe, traditionally, we believe that many of our rituals, of course, originate with the Torah itself. There are certain rituals, ceremonies, religious rites, which of course are inscribed in the Torah, the Bible, which accompanied the divine revelation, of course, at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai. There are others which are rabbinically enacted.
Could you give us some examples, just
All right.
what they are, just by name?
Kashrut, the dietary laws, of course, are Torah mandated. The wearing of tefillin phylacteries are Torah mandated. A lot of the religious observance, the component of eating in the sukkah during Sukkot, the waving of the lulav in the etrog during the Sukkot holiday. Also, all of these components are mentioned in the Torah itself. Many times, however, of course, the Torah was written in shorthand, and therefore that was the written tradition. The oral tradition, which accompanied the divine revelation, which ultimately became the Talmud, really gave us the full understanding of these rituals and the full components. Other rituals, however, other ceremonies, are of course rabbinically enacted. If you take the holiday which we're about to celebrate this in our calendar year, the holiday of Purim, for instance, then the celebration itself is rabbinically enacted. Hanukkah is rabbinically enacted. Tisha B'Av, the fast of Tisha B'Av, rabbinically enacted. And therefore, these rituals or these ceremonies are rabbinically endorsed, if you will. However, the rabbis drew their authority from the Torah, based in the Torah itself, based on the sentence, K'chol asher yerucha, all which they have taught you, you shall not go to the left or to the right. So rabbinic authority is rooted in the religious authority of the divine Torah itself. So depending on which ritual we're talking about, really.
Okay. Let's now move over to the other side of the subject, and ethics. What do we mean by ethics?
Ethics I would define really as morality, a code of conduct, a way in which we're supposed to behave in our daily actions. Not unfortunately, many people associate religion with tefillin or Shabbos or Yamulka. That's not what Judaism means by religion. Religion is all-encompassing. In the mitzvot, whether Ashkenazic or Sephardic, the commandments which God gave us were given for one reason. And that, we're told, is L'tzaref et habriot, to make the humanity, to elevate humanity, to make them purer, so to speak. And therefore, the commandments which God gave us, which regulate our behavior between man and God, are to make us better people. And therefore, to divide and conquer, so to speak, is not a Jewish attitude.
How important is ethics in the Jewish teachings?
A person cannot be a whole Jew without being an ethical, moral human being. The prophets cry out all the time. Isaiah, for instance, the prophet, as Lama li rov zivchechem, why do I need your sacrifices? God doesn't want empty ritual. There has to be one's heart and one's soul behind it. In that same crying of Isaiah, he states, Dir shu tov, I want you to make sure that you do that which is correct, to the yosom, to the orphan, to the widow, to those who are downtrodden in society, that which we refer to today as tikkun olam, making the world a better place in which to live, is part and parcel of Judaism.
At first, their superficial appearances, one might think that ritual and ethics are really two different things. You've already alluded to the fact that it's really not totally independent. That they're really a package deal. How would we describe the interrelationship of it? Because one of the things that I suspect, that I've always believed, is that actually one needs the other, that there's a relationship between the two, that it's not really possible to survive on one without the other.
100% correct. It's very difficult when we take either one ritual or one commandment or one ethical mandate and analyze it separately, because Judaism is like a big puzzle. And when you have the puzzle complete, it looks beautiful. You can see that it's a picture of a beautiful tree or a scene, a country scene. If you pick up one piece, it's very hard to even distinguish what that piece is, and you don't see the beauty of that piece, because only when it's within the mizgeret, within the framework of the entire body, do you see actually what it means. Those who, and I'll use the word pretend to be observant Jews by either observing the ritual at the expense of the ethics, or, as we find with modern man, perhaps the opposite, the ethics at the expense of the ritual, are not fulfilling their obligations.
If we talk about the purpose of ethics, that almost kind of seems understandable, what the purpose of ethics is. But what would the purpose of ritual be?
All mitzvos, all commandments which God gave us, are in order to bring us closer to Him, maybe to make us a better person, to make us more spiritual, to make us more aware of God's presence in the world, how He affects the world, and how we are supposed to affect the world also. It's incumbent upon every individual to really make the world a better place in which to live. That your being here, my being here in this world, is to be beneficial to the world, not only to ourselves. It's not only a selfish preoccupation, or even a familial preoccupation, or a neighborhood preoccupation. It's in order to affect humanity in general, and the Jewish people specifically, of course, that not only do our acts affect ourselves, but there's a group responsibility. If I can use the terminology of the individual acts of particular Jews, in many ways affect the destiny of the entire people. Either we become a Kiddush Hashem, meaning our acts sanctify God's name, or God forbid we become a Chilul Hashem, we become a desecration of God's name, depending on our actions in this world.
One of the interesting things that I find in Jewish practices is that there are certain practices, certain rituals, if you will, that we do as individuals, and there are others we do as a group. What does doing it as a group really do for us, though?
All right. For instance, if you're talking about certain group activities which need a minyan, which need a quorum ritual quorum in order to to be fulfilled. Judaism, unlike other religions, is not necessarily a public religion, meaning it's not a synagogue-based religion. In many ways, Judaism is a home-based or a personal-based religion, that there, with the exception of certain particular mitzvahs which need a minyan, which need a quorum, certain parts of the davening of the service which we cannot say, excuse me, if there's not a minyan present. Otherwise, most commandments are designed for the individual, not for the group. The group can enhance some of the ritual observance, but in no way is it dependent upon, in most cases, upon a group activity. It's an individual activity, because Judaism works on the person more or less, not necessarily the entire group. Many persons make up the whole group, but each individual is a world in himself, if I can say that.
It's interesting that there are parallels, whereas the private versus the community, there are parallels also with ethics, where the community has to behave as a community in certain ethical ways. Some extreme examples is an example of even how the community carries out a war. There are modes of restrictions that are required in a very parallel way as a community.
Because of the fact that if morality is for the individual, then the individuals, of course, make up the group. The group has to have a group morality also. And I think that many of our young people, unfortunately, are, if I can use the word, being gypped by not realizing this. Many of our young people whose education or home life may not be as rich as others seem to identify Judaism with tallis and tefillin and Shabbos and kashrut only. And I'm not in any way, shape, or form trying to denigrate these observances, but they don't understand that the great moral teachings which they think they've discovered elsewhere are rooted totally in Judaism. Totally in Judaism. And they're even surprised to find out that Judaism has something to say about abortion, about war, about so many every modern day problem which exists today. That Judaism did not stop with the revelation at Mount Sinai. It really just started there and continues to unfold itself every day.
We have to take a break. We'll be back in just 1 minute, continuing our discussion, ethics versus ritual, with Rabbi Stephen Dworkin.
In one of my recent films, all kinds of unexpected things happened to me. But the unexpected surprised me even more in real life. I learned that 1 in 10 of us suffers from a hearing loss, and of course I was one of them. For an actor, a hearing problem is like being bound and gagged, because the give and take of dialogue depends on good hearing. And I've also just learned that over 90% of hearing problems can be helped medically, surgically, or like me, with a hearing aid. So if you or someone you love suspects a hearing loss, arrange for a checkup. And don't let anything stand in your way. For hearing help information, call the Hearing Helpline toll-free at 800-EAR-WELL. That's 800-EARWELL. Earwell. Discover a world of better hearing.
Welcome back to our discussion, Ethics versus Ritual, with Rabbi Stephen Dworkin. How does classical Judaism view the person who is very precise in the practice of ritual, but not careful with their ethical behavior?
As I said before, really, that was one of the prime targets, one of the prime outcries, if you will, of prophetic Judaism, where people thought that they could throw God a bone, so to speak, by taking care of ritual which really regulated their behavior with God, and really being very short-sighted when it came to their behavior towards their fellow man. I have to just note here that we're all aware of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And once again, there's really misinformation attached to that holiday. That many people think that they can do anything, and Yom Kippur wipes off the slate, and then we'll start anew. The truth is that Yom Kippur only forgives for those transgressions which affect the relationship between man and God. God then has the power, so to speak, to forgive. But if I've wronged my fellow man, the halacha is ad sheyiratza es chavero, until I've made amends with my fellow man whom I have wronged, I'm not forgiven. Not by God, and of course not by man. That's a personal relationship. It goes so far that Jewish tradition even dictated, if I had wronged somebody and that person no longer is alive, then forget about financial restitution, which I had to make. That can go to his heirs. There was a custom that an individual would go to the cemetery with a minyan, which means in front of a quorum of men, and really pour out his heart and ask for forgiveness symbolically to that person whom he's wronged.
One of the things that is, I think, misunderstood by some people, as an example, if in the observance of Shabbat, there are times where there are emergencies that occur, where a person gets sick or injured and has to be attended to. How does the ritual of observance of the Shabbat relate to the need for helping a person who is ill or...
There's no question that pikuach nefesh, meaning the danger to one's life, takes precedence over the observance of Shabbos. And this is based, as the Talmud tells us, on muta lechalel Shabbos achas, that one may transgress this Shabbos, so that the other individual, the one who's in danger, will have the opportunity to observe many more Shabbosim in the future. That, once again, by the way, just think of it, I'm desecrating Shabbos so that you will be able to observe. I'm placing your needs above my needs in that case. In Judaism, by the way, places other people's needs above one's own in many instances throughout. There are very few commandments. There are 3 specifically which a person should not violate, but otherwise Shabbos, kashrut, so many others, really, with the exception of idolatry, my killing somebody else in order to save my own life, or adultery, those are the 3 no-nos, if you will, but otherwise life takes precedence over all other commandments.
Going to the other side of the coin, is it possible, is it realistic to have a person be very precise in terms of ethical behavior without the need for ritual?
Without the need is, I think, the wrong term, Jack. Are there individuals who are precise? Yes, in their ethical behavior, whom I would say are truly wonderful, ethical, moral, religious human beings in that sphere, definitely. And do not observe the ritual? Yes. I find fault with that theologically, because that's not what Judaism says, but even from a sociological point of view, eventually, it may not happen in this generation or with this person, but will happen eventually that ethical behavior, if it's not attached to ritual, the ritual is that which makes actions Jewish, so to speak. There are certain ethics and morals which are particularly Jewish, but in a general sense, each of us, every human being in the world, is commanded to be ethical and to be moral. Eventually, if it's divorced, if ethical behavior is divorced from any kind of ritual which is particularly Jewish, then one can become a universalist, can become anything which is not necessarily connected to Judaism. You lose the mooring, you lose the roots in Judaism in that manner.
One of the thought that I had, frankly, is that I believe that ritual is a very convenient support for helping the person sustain his ethical behavior and also transmitting those values to the next generation. And that's not a simple thing to do. And there has to be some mechanism or some system for facilitating that process.
The ritual, as you say, just to expand for a moment, is also a constant reminder of our relationship with God. If we can't compartmentalize our relationship with God or with man, and that it's really ludicrous to say that an individual could put tefillin on at 7:30 in the morning, and then 8 o'clock in the morning be unethical in his business conduct or in the way he treats human beings. That's totally, really denigrated and almost, I could say, negated to some extent the putting on of the tefillin in the morning. They're separate mitzvahs, of course, and one mitzvah doesn't detract from the other, but in one's mind, really, it's really shortchanged God and Judaism in many ways.
I'd like to pick a few of these, of the ritual practices, to try to get some idea of what specifically they do for us. As an example, let's take observance of the Sabbath.
Observing the Sabbath, I mean, traditionally we are to observe the Sabbath, for it reminds us, A, of the creation of the world, that God created the world, our dependence upon God, that all week, for instance, where we think, perhaps, that we're masters of our own destiny. We're the big bosses, whether in our corporate structure or in our medical practice, in our law practice, in our business, as teachers, or whatever we may do for a living, that we're really kochi ve'etzem yodi, that it really is my strength and my talents which have made me what I am. Shabbos comes to teach us that all of us are dependent on God, and no matter what one's station in life is, economic, socioeconomic station in life, really there is no difference in God's eye, and if there's no difference in God's eye, there can't be any difference in our eyes. Judaism does not recognize any differentiation between socioeconomic stations in life. One can have 9 multimillionaires and there's no minion. One can have 10, if you will, paupers and there is a minion. It's each individual. The Torah even specifically says that each individual is created in the image of God and is to be accorded certain rights and prerogatives and privileges because of that, and no difference accorded to human beings. In fact, many times we're supposed to bend over backwards to ensure that the individual who normally wouldn't be given honor or wouldn't be treated as royally as he really should be because of taking into consideration the fact that he's B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of God.
How about observing the kashrut?
All right. Kashrus, the dietary laws, are given to us also in order, there are specifics attached to it, but basically it's discipline. Man has to realize that all of his appetites, be they desire for power, for avarice, for gain, for any kind of financial success, that he cannot do whatever he wishes. There's a higher order, so to speak, as one of the national brands tells us. They appeal to a higher authority. There's a higher authority to which every man and every woman, every human being must, of course, answer to. And that higher authority, of course, is God. And therefore, if I can't eat everything that I want, or eat together everything that I wish, that instills a person with a certain discipline, a discipline of being able to control his desires, and those desires, as they transfer into lust, into many other desires, there's a necessity to have a discipline over one's, be it animalistic, if you want to use desires, or any kind of desires, which may not always be honorable.
So I guess what you're really saying is that in a way it helps us modify our behavior to improve the kind of person that we are, perhaps going into the ethical, making us a more ethical person, where the ritual very directly can help us accomplish that. Very quickly, how about regular prayer?
Regular prayer, and by the way, let me just add just a moment for kashrus. The dietary laws, when push comes to shove, they happen to be part of the mitzvos, which are determined to be chukim. Chukim are commandments which are given by God, for which we may not know the reason or don't understand the reason. Once again, indicating that there has to be a certain discipline, an act of faith that we believe that this is correct, and that's why we do it. The regular prayer, of course, once again, shows man's dependence upon God and his knowledge that there's someone above him, that there's always ozen shamas, an ear that's listening and an eye that sees, so to speak, who hopefully is responsive to our needs and our desires also.
I thank you so much. I think now that people have heard you, I think they now understand why I've wanted to have you here for such a long time.
My pleasure.
And I really am very delighted that you've been able to come and help us with such a very difficult subject, but I hope we've helped people understand. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much. My pleasure. Thanks, Jack.
We would like to thank our guest for joining us for this program. We hope you will tune in for our next program in the series, Judaism Today. Judaism Today is brought to you by the New Jersey region of the United Synagogue of America. We welcome your comments and suggestions, and we invite you to write to us at the United Synagogue of America, Deerfield Road and Academy Terrace, Linden, New Jersey, 07036. That's the United Synagogue of America, Deerfield Road and Academy Terrace, Linden, New Jersey, 07036. This is Jack Weinshanker, your host for the Judaism Today television series. Our Jewish tradition teaches that each of us is important as a participant in the prayer services of our congregation. While we may pray alone, joining with our community in prayer adds a dimension that we cannot attain on our own. Please make regular attendance at your local synagogue a habit. You and your family will enjoy that extra dimension. Contact your local synagogue for information about prayer services in your community.